I kicked out my dad and his pregnant wife out of the home I legally own, after they sent my depressed sister to live with our aunt. So, my mom died 3 years ago from cancer, and it was honestly the worst thing that ever happened to our family. But before she passed, she made sure to leave me the main house where we grew up since it was from her side of the family. My little sister, Emma, got the vacation house up north. My dad got nothing because he was already acting shady toward the end of Mom's illness. 6 months after the funeral, Dad shows up with this woman named Bridget, who's like 10 years younger than him. She immediately moves into my house and starts acting like she owns the place. First thing she does is take down every single family photo we had in the living room and dining room. All the pictures of Mom are family vacations, even Emma's graduation photos gone. Now, Emma's room looks like a shrine because that's where all our memories ended up. Emma was only 13 when Mom died and she never really got over it. She's been seeing a therapist and everything, but some days are just harder than others. Dad doesn't really get it because he's too busy playing house with his new wife. Last month, they announced they're having twins. Emma completely lost it. She locked herself in her room for 2 days straight and wouldn't eat anything. I had to drive over and basically force her to come out. The whole thing was a mess for Emma's 16th birthday last week. She wanted to have a sleepover with like 8 of her friends. Dad said yes before he and Bridget left for some romantic weekend getaway. The party was supposed to end at midnight, but you know how teenage girls are. They stayed up until like 4 o'clock in the morning doing face masks and watching movies. Dad and Bridget came home the next morning around 10 o'clock and found all the girls passed out in the living room. There were blankets everywhere, some leftover pizza boxes and a few makeup containers on the coffee table. Nothing crazy, just normal sleepover stuff. But Bridget absolutely freaked out. She started screaming at Emma in front of all her friends about how disrespectful she was, and how she was just like our mom. Then she said the worst thing possible. She told Emma that she was a burden on Dad and that she needed to learn some respect. She literally packed Emma's bags right there and called her aunt to pick her up. Emma was crying and her friends were just standing there not knowing what to do. Dad didn't say a single word to defend her. He just stood there like a coward while his wife kicked his own daughter out of the house. I found out that evening when Emma called me sobbing. I drove straight over to Aunt Lisa's house and Emma was just broken. She kept saying she didn't understand what she did wrong and that she missed Mom. It was heartbreaking. The next morning, I showed up at the house with Emma's spare key. Bridget was eating breakfast in the kitchen when I walked in. She had the nerve to ask what I was doing there. I told her and Dad they had exactly 1 week to pack their stuff and get out. Bridget started laughing and said I couldn't kick them out of their own home. That's when I pulled out the deed with my name on it. Her face went completely white. She had no idea the house belonged to me, and not Dad. Dad tried to argue that I was being cruel to a pregnant woman, but I shut that down real quick. I told him if he cared so much about protecting pregnant women, maybe he should have protected his grieving daughter instead of letting his wife call her a burden. Bridget started crying about how she was 7 months pregnant and had nowhere to go. I told her she should have thought about that before she decided to kick out a 16-year-old girl who just lost her mom. Dad called me a cruel brat and said he was going to fight Mom's will in court. I laughed and told him good luck because Mom's family already has their lawyer ready to go. He stormed out after that, slamming the door so hard one of the picture frames rattled on the wall, and Bridget followed him, still crying and holding her stomach like she was auditioning for a daytime soap. I stayed long enough to make sure they understood I wasn't bluffing. Then I went back to Aunt Lisa's to sit with Emma. She barely spoke that night, just curled up on the couch hugging one of Mom's old sweaters like it was the only thing keeping her together. And that's when I knew I'd made the right call no matter how ugly this was about to get. Over the next few days, Dad tried every manipulation tactic he knew. First came the guilt texts about how family should stick together, and how Mom would be disappointed in me. When that didn't work, he switched to anger, sending long messages about how I was stealing his future and his unborn children's security. I blocked his number after he called me heartless for choosing a moody teenager over my own father. Bridget tried reaching out to, but not directly. She posted vague Facebook statuses about being betrayed by greedy children and being forced out while pregnant. And I watched relatives I barely speak to comment with sad emojis and prayers. I didn't engage. Instead, I focused on Emma. I enrolled her in a different therapist closer to my place, one who specialized in grief and trauma, and I moved her into the main house with me. The first night she slept there, she stood in the living room just staring at the family photos I put back up exactly where Mom had hung them, and she cried so hard she could barely breathe. It took weeks, but slowly she started eating again, started laughing at stupid shows, started acting like a teenager instead of a ghost. Meanwhile, Dad and Bridget packed under constant tension. I gave them exactly 7 days like I said. not a minute more. On the last day, Dad tried one final move. He showed up with some papers claiming he had tenant rights and that I couldn't just evict him. I calmly showed him the written notice my lawyer had already prepared and reminded him that he'd never paid rent, utilities, or taxes, and that legally he was a guest who had overstayed his welcome. He looked smaller then, like the fight had drained out of him. Bridget didn't say a word, just glared at me like I was a villain in her story. When they finally left, the house felt lighter, like it could breathe again. Emma helped me change the locks that same afternoon. A week later, I got a call from Aunt Lisa telling me Dad was telling anyone who would listen that I'd stolen his house and brainwashed Emma against him. Emma overheard part of that conversation and just said quietly, "I don't want to see him for a while." I didn't push. I told her she didn't know anyone access to her just because they shared blood. A month later, Dad actually did try to contest the will. It went nowhere. Mom had been meticulous, and her lawyer shredded his arguments in one meeting. After that, the silence was sudden and complete. No more texts, no more posts, nothing. Emma's birthday photos went up on the wall where they belonged. And for the first time since Mom died, the house felt like home again. I know some people think I went too far, that kicking out a pregnant woman is unforgivable. But every time I see my sister smiling again instead of crying herself to sleep, I know I chose the right side. Storytime, my wife handed me divorce papers after she inherited over $10 million and told me to leave the house immediately. As I was packing my bag, my wife yelled, "You're not taking anything from here. Hand over that bag." When I refused, my wife's brothers dragged me out of the house by my hair. But before I left, I warned them that they would regret it greatly. What happened next was something they never saw coming. Chapter 1: The Bag. I was halfway through folding the shirts into a weekend of when the front door opened like a scene change. My wife Alina didn't even take her sunglasses off. She slid a manila envelope across the kitchen island. Sign pack, go. The top page said petition for dissolution. Her new manicure tapped the signature line like a metronome. "Is this a joke?" I asked. "We just buried your uncle last week." "It's not a joke," she said, voice flat. "And don't play sentimental with me. The trust wired this morning. 8 figures. I'm done subsidizing your hobbies. My job is not a hobby." I kept my voice low. "And this is my house, too." "It was," she said, pulling her phone out to film me like I was a wildlife sighting. "Now it's mine." "I'm not negotiating." "Liam, pack your bag and leave behind her." Her brothers shouldered in. Victor first, all gym shoulders and cheap cologne swagger. Then Dimma with a permanent smirk. They didn't bother with hello. They fanned out like security at a nightclub. Alina pointed at the duffel. "He's not taking anything from here. Hand over that bag." "It's clothes and my laptop," I said. "Personal property. Don't touch it." "Losers don't get laptops," Dimma said, and the smirk widened. The smart thing would have been to put the phone on record. I was already there. I tapped my screen the second the envelope slid across the counter. The red timer in the corner ticked past 0 hours, 1 minute and 42 seconds. "Alina?" I tried once more, softer. "We've been married 7 years. I paid your bar exam fees twice. I sat in Urs with your mom. I cooked meals for your uncle when chemo made him sick. You don't have to do it like this." That got a laugh. Hers brittle into loud. "You love speeches. Here's mine. You are a drag on my image, on my income, on every room you enter. Sign the papers, hand over the bag, and walk out with a little dignity for once." I zipped the duffel. "No, Victor didn't warn me." He just grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked me backwards so hard my eyes watered. Dimma came in from the side, snatching at the strap. The phone clattered across the tile and kept recording. Just at shoe level now. Alina's voice carried sharp and clear. "Get him out. He's trespassing." "You can't trespass in your own house," I said through my teeth, vision sparkling. They frog marched me to the porch, my scalp on fire, my feet stumbling for traction. A neighbor looked up from a stroller, eyes wide, then disappeared back behind a hedge. There was a split second where I thought about swinging. And then I remembered every case I worked where the one punch ruined the right person's whole. Clean record, I didn't swing. They dumped me on the front steps. The duffel hit my ribs, then vanished back inside with Dimma. The door slammed. The new smart lock chirped for a long beat. It was just me, the ache in my scalp, the dirt in my teeth, and the sound of my own breath. Alina opened the door again, just enough to slide the envelope after me with her toe. "You have 30 minutes to be off the property. After that, I call the cops and tell them you're unstable. Make good choices, Liam." I pushed myself up, wiped my hands on my jeans, and looked at all 3 of them framed in the doorway. The brothers puffed up. Alina lit from behind like a stage actress who finally got the role she wanted. "Okay," I said. "Here's my speech." I met each pair of eyes in turn. "You just committed a felony battery on camera. You also attempted a self-help eviction of a co-owner, which is illegal in the state. You threatened to make a false police report, and you impeded me from removing my effects. I'm going to there. Then I'm going to the police. Then I'm going to call the trustee whose name is on your wire, Alina. Because you didn't read the trust, her chin twitched just once. What trust? Victor said, the word trust coming out like a new language. The one with a conduct clause, I said. The one your uncle asked me to prove before he signed, the one that freezes distributions if the beneficiary engages in criminal acts or moral turpitude, like assault or fraud or filing false reports to weaponize the system. Alina's mouth opened then snapped shut. You're bluffing. I smiled, not friendly. Then you have nothing to worry about. I walked down the steps. My scalp throbbed. My hands shook. But the part of me that tracks details for a living was already lining up the dominoes. Photos of the hair torn out. ER intake notes. Time-stamped video. Doorbell cam. Neighbor witness. 911 call. Temporary protective order. Motion for exclusive possession. Injunction against asset dissipation. Notice to trustee. Section 9.3, Bad Acts. At the sidewalk, I turned back once. You will regret this, I said. Quiet, not a threat. More like a weather report. Sooner than you think, I didn't wait for an answer. I got in my car, shut the door, and in the rearview mirror watched the three of them collapse into fast overlapping whispers. I drove to urgent care. The nurse winced when she saw my scalp and clicked her mouse fast. I held still for the photos. I asked them to note Aslan's spouse's brother's location, marital residence. Then I stepped outside and called the non-emergency line because if you want the dominoes to fall in the right order, you don't rush the first one. When I finally checked into a cheap hotel near the courthouse, I set the duff I didn't have beside the bed out of habit and laughed once, short and humorless. Then I opened my laptop, the one I kept at work, and drafted 3 emails. To Detective Alvarez. Subject line assault battery at address video attached to my attorney. Subject line emergency TT or O plus exclusive use control. And to S. Mendel, trustee. Subject line, notice of potential clause 9.3 trigger, beneficiary conduct. I attached the clip in the freeze frame. Victor's fist is in my hair. Dimma's hand is on my bag and Alina is saying he's trespassing. I hit send, then I lay back on the bed, ice pack under my neck. And for the first time all day let myself feel it. Not just the anger but the grief. 7 years, holidays, hospital rooms, ordinary Tuesdays. You don't amputate that without some phantom pain. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The second buzz came 30 seconds later from Mendel Trust. I didn't pick up that either. Not yet, there's a rhythm to taking your life back. Evidence first, action second. Revenge that comes dressed as consequence. Chapter 2, the fallout begins. The morning after their visit, I woke to a string of notifications. Emails, voicemails, missed calls. All from the same small circle of people who 24 hours ago had dragged me by the hair out of my own home. The first was from my lawyer. We've got everything we need. The video is gold. Don't speak directly to your wife or her brothers. Let me handle it. We'll file for exclusive use of the residence today. By the end of the week, the cops will be knocking on their door, not yours. The second was from Detective Alvarez. Mr. Novak, we've reviewed the footage. This is clear-cut battery. I've already dispatched a unit to interview the responding neighbor who witnessed it. Charges will be filed. Expect to hear from the DA. And the third, the most satisfying, was from Mendel Trust, Mr. Novak. This is to acknowledge receipt of your notice regarding potential clause 9.3 trigger. The video you provided is under review. Please be advised. Disbursement of funds to Miss Alina Novak is temporarily suspended pending investigation of misconduct. You will be contacted for further information. By noon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice, shrill, panicked, spilled through the speaker. Liam, what did you do? The trust froze my accounts. They won't let me access a cent. Do you realize I have bills? Do you realize I have plans? I let her rant for a full 30 seconds before cutting in. Calm as glass. Remember what I said? You regret it sooner than you thought. This is only the start, Alina. You brought this on yourself. She tried to pivot, her tone dripping sugar. We don't have to do this. Just let's talk. I'll give you something. A settlement. Whatever you want. Save it for court, I said and hung up. That evening, my lawyer called again, almost amused. Victor and Dimma thought roughing you up was no big deal. Unfortunately for them, the DA thinks otherwise. They'll be getting charges. And the best part, any conviction tied to this case further strengthens the trust conduct clause. Alina's inheritance is chained to their stupidity. I pictured the smug brothers in handcuffs, their swagger evaporating. For the first time in days, my scalp didn't ache. That night, I sat in my hotel room drafting one more email. Not to a lawyer, not to the trust, but to a journalist I knew from years back, someone who specialized in high society scandals. I didn't attach the video yet, just teased the story. Prominent family inherits millions within 24 hours. Domestic assault, trust freeze, police charges, interested? Her reply came in 5 minutes. Tell me everything. I smiled at the screen. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about making sure none of them, Alina, her brothers, her smug family, could ever rewrite the story to paint themselves as victims. Number this time, the truth would be loud. Chapter 3. The Courtroom Hammer. 2 weeks later, I walked into the county courthouse wearing the same calm expression I'd worn when Alina's brothers dragged me by the hair, only this time the bruises were gone, replaced with polished shoes and a folder of ironclad evidence. Alina arrived flanked by her brothers, their arrogance still intact despite the pending charges. She looked smug, like she still believed money could erase everything. Her lawyer whispered something to her as they sat down, but the confidence in her eyes faltered when she saw the DA enter with a box of files. The bailiff called order. The judge, stern, non-incensed, and known for her intolerance of theatrics, scanned the docket. This case concerns both criminal charges of assault and civil proceedings related to divorce and property distribution. I understand there are significant funds at stake. Let's proceed. Alina's lawyer launched in first. Your Honor, this is nothing but a bitter husband trying to cling to wealth that rightfully belongs to my client. The judge cut him off. Save your speeches. Show me evidence. That was our cue. My lawyer stood and calmly cued the footage. The screen lit up with the video. Alina's brothers yanking me by the hair, her shouting as I clutched my bag the moment they shoved me out the door. Gasps echoed in the gallery. Even the judge's eyebrows arched. Clear battery, she said flatly. The DA's office may proceed with criminal charges against the brothers. Victor muttered a curse under his breath. Dima went pale. Then my lawyer handed the judge a neatly bound document. My father-in-law's trust agreement. He pointed straight to clause 9.3. Misconduct resulting in criminal liability immediately suspends the beneficiary's access to funds. Pending trustee review. As the court can see, Mrs. Novak's inheritance is currently frozen. The judge flipped through the pages, nodded, then looked straight at Alina. You're telling me you filed for divorce the very day you inherited millions, and within 24 hours your brothers assaulted your husband in your presence, and you want this court to believe you're the victim? Her lawyer stammered. Alina's lips trembled. That's when I leaned forward and whispered to my attorney. He nodded, then addressed the court. Your Honor, before we adjourn, we'd like to submit one more piece of evidence. A series of recorded voicemails left by Mrs. Novak herself after the trust freeze. In them, she explicitly admits she only married Mr. Novak for security and intended to discard him the moment her inheritance came through. The first recording played, her voice sharp, venomous. I don't need you anymore. I've got the money. You'll be nothing without me, Liam, nothing. The courtroom went silent. The judge leaned forward, hands steepled. Well, Mrs. Novak, you certainly made my job easier. Her gavel cracked like thunder. Temporary possession of the marital residence awarded to Mr. Novak. Inheritance funds remain frozen pending trustee decision. Criminal proceedings against the brothers to proceed immediately. Court is adjourned. As I walked out of that courtroom, her lawyer shouted after us, "This isn't over." But Alina wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring at the floor, pale, realizing the life she built on arrogance was collapsing faster than she could stop it. And I hadn't even played my last card yet. Chapter 4. The Public Exposure. The courtroom victory was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. Alina and her family still believed they could hide behind money, silence the story, and bounce back. What they didn't realize was that I had already taken the fight outside the courthouse. 2 nights earlier, I'd met with a journalist I trusted, Maya, a seasoned investigative reporter who had a reputation for peeling back the glossy surface of wealthy families and exposing the rot beneath. She listened quietly as I laid out the story, showing her the trust documents, the video of the assault, and the recordings of Alina mocking me. Her pen scratched across the notepad as she nodded slowly. This isn't just a domestic scandal, Maya said finally. It's about greed, abuse, and power. People will eat this alive. We agreed on one condition. She wouldn't release anything until after the initial court ruling. That way, the press coverage wouldn't jeopardize the case. Now, with the ruling secure, she was ready to move. The morning after court, while Alina's lawyer scrambled to file appeals, the story broke. Ace faces allegations of fraud and domestic abuse after inheritance windfall. The article was brutal. It outlined everything. The assault, the trust clause freezing her inheritance, her recorded threats, and the courtroom humiliation. Screenshots of the video were blurred but recognizable. My name was kept discreet, but anyone in our city knew who she was. Within hours, her face was plastered across news sites and trending on social media. Commenters shredded her. How do you inherit millions and still end up in court for assault? That voicemail is chilling. She deserves to lose everything. Imagine treating your husband like that while living off his family's business. Alina's glamorous image, the socialite, the modern entrepreneur she pretended to be, evaporated overnight. By the afternoon, her employer announced she was on indefinite leave pending investigation. Brand partners dropped her invitations to high society events were rescinded. Even her own brothers weren't spared. Local radio shows mocked them as trust fund thugs. The DA publicly confirmed their criminal charges, and memes of them dragging me out of my own house spread online. Her mother, once smug and untouchable, tried to defend her daughter in a TV interview. But when the anchor played the voicemail clip, even she looked like she'd swallowed glass. I didn't gloat publicly. That wasn't my style. Instead, I kept quiet, focused on my work, and spent evenings with friends who actually respected me. Because revenge isn't always about shouting, I won. Sometimes it's about watching your enemies collapse under the weight of their own arrogance, and making sure the world sees every crack. And the best part, the story wasn't done yet. The Trust's board of trustees had reached out to me privately. They wanted to discuss who was truly fit to manage the assets now that Alina had disgraced herself. Chapter 5: The Trustees' Verdict. The media storm had left Alina and her brother staggering, but the Trust's meeting was a real battlefield, the one that would decide the future of her late father's fortune. The Trust's office was a quiet wood-paneled room with tall windows overlooking the city. 3 gay-haired men and 1 sharp-eyed woman sat across from me. They were old friends of Alina's father, people who had watched me sit through board meetings silently, while he trained me in the finer points of the business world. One of them, Mr. Sterling, leaned forward. We've been reviewing the situation. The clause your wife overlooked. Section 14 of the Trust makes it clear. Assets cannot be transferred to an heir who engages in criminal behavior or gross misconduct. He tapped the folder in front of him. The courts have already recognized her behavior as abuse. The press has destroyed her public credibility. That leaves us with a decision. Who should manage these assets now? For a moment I thought they were hinting at me that I would be asked to step in as a caretaker. But then Miss Carter, the trustee with eyes like ice, slid a document across the table. We've also reviewed your history with the company and the years you worked under her father. He respected you. We all did. And now, with your ex-wife disgraced, you are the most stable candidate left. I opened the folder. It was an appointment contract. They weren't just freezing her inheritance. They were handing me operational control of the real estate empire, assets worth over $200 million. By the time Alina heard, the decision had already been made public in a formal press release. She stormed into the trustees' building 2 hours later, cameras following her, shouting that it was all a conspiracy. Her brothers tried to muscle their way past security, but the sight of them in court-ordered ankle monitors made the reporters laugh harder. When she finally reached the boardroom, she pointed at me, shaking with fury. You stole this from me. I stood calmly, the press recording every word. No, Alina, you threw it away the day you thought money made you untouchable. Her face twisted, her screams echoing down the marble halls, while I quietly walked out to the waiting cameras. The new CEO of the empire she had thought she owned. That night, as I looked out over the city from the penthouse she once bragged about, I felt no triumph, just clarity, greed, arrogance, cruelty. They had taken everything from her. All I had done was hold up the mirror and let the world see. And the world had judged her more harshly than I ever could. Epilogue. The final curtain. Months passed. The scandal that had once consumed headlines faded into memory. But not for Alina. Her criminal record barred her from corporate work. Former friends avoided her like a virus. Her brothers, bitter and broke after serving jail time, cut her off entirely. The mansion she once paraded on social media was foreclosed. She ended up living in a cramped apartment far from the city, occasionally spotted at discount stores by those who remembered the A's who lost everything. The same people who once toasted to her good fortune now whispered about her fall, like a cautionary tale. Meanwhile, I had quietly rebuilt. Running the real estate empire wasn't just about money. It was about honor. I created scholarships in her father's name, supported community housing projects, and hired people her family had once turned away. Most importantly, my children thrived. No more shouting matches, no more fear of being used as pawns. They grew up in a home where peace wasn't a luxury. It was the foundation. One evening, my daughter asked me, Dad, why don't you ever talk about Mom anymore? I smiled gently. Because some stories don't deserve to be told twice. The last time I saw Alina was at a charity gala one hosted. She wasn't invited, of course, but she lingered outside, staring in through the glass windows at the life she had thrown away. She looked at me, her eyes hollow, lips trembling as if begging for recognition. I simply turned back to my children and raised a toast. Alina had wanted wealth, power, and freedom. Instead, she was left with silence, shame, and regret. And me? I had everything she could never buy: respect, family, and peace. Was this revenge perfectly justified?